Sure.
You are listening to the Businesstalk podcast. I am your host Deepak. It's an honor to have Kyle McDowell, founder of Kyle McDowell Incorporation, as our esteemed guest on today's episode. Kyle is a best-selling author, leadership coach, and dynamic speaker with nearly 30 years of experience guiding tens of thousands of employees across some of America's top corporations, including United Health Group, CVS Health, and Bank of America. Driven by a deep passion for people and a steadfast belief that corporate America can thrive through authentic leadership. Kyle developed the 10 V's, his set of core principles designed to foster genuine, courageous leadership. These principles, from the foundation of his Wall Street Journal and USA Today best-selling book, begin with V 10 Principles for Building and Sustaining a Culture of Excellence. Having successfully embedded the 10 V's into the culture of multiple organizations, Kyle launched Kyle McDowell Incorporation, a global coaching and consulting firm dedicated to elevating organizational effectiveness by empowering leaders who embrace the transformating power of we. Known for his motivational approach that turns managers into authentic leaders and revitalizes corporate culture, Kyle frequently speaks at business conferences, educational institutions, and non-profit events. His insights have been featured in prominent publications like the Wall Street Journal, the Boston Herald, and the Burlington Free Press. Kyle holds a bachelor degree from the University of South Florida and an MBA from Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management. He currently resides in Tampa, Florida. In this episode, Kyle McDowell shares valuable insights from his widely recognized book, Begin with V 10 Principles for Building and Sustaining a Culture of Excellence. So, without further delay, let's welcome Kyle McDowell to the podcast. Kyle, it's an honor and privilege to have you join us today.
Well, after that introduction, I think the honor is all mine, Deepak. Thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to our chat, and I'm grateful for the opportunity. So thank you.
Thank you. Kyle, you describe Begin with V as a rallying cry for a leadership style grounded in people, not power. What inspired you to shift from traditional leadership models to this people-first approach?
Well, it was trial and error, if I'm being completely honest. So as you mentioned, I spent about 30 years in big corporate America, leading really massive organizations. For some context, in my last couple of roles, I led north of 30,000 employees. And that 30-year journey, at least for me, I think was not dissimilar from most. I entered the workforce with a lot of optimism and passion. I wanted to find fulfillment. I wanted to make an impact. And I set out on this journey to take on bigger and bigger things and have a greater scope of responsibility. And I was pretty successful on that front. I checked a lot of boxes, and by most standards, I had what would probably be described as a pretty successful career. But Deepak, it was probably year 20, year 21 or so that my level of apathy was outpacing the accolades, and I found myself really disenfranchised and disconnected from the work that I was doing. I lost all of those emotions and desire to be or have an impact, and I certainly wasn't fulfilled. And matter of fact, I was on the doorstep of a divorce that ultimately happened, and then I also, my health was not in a good way because my work was my priority. And I managed in a way that was, I'm not proud of it, but it was results at all costs. I would raise my voice, bang my fist on the desk, the classic command and control style, because it was what I observed. It was kind of the way I was raised inside of the corporate world. And it was around year 20 that I just had enough. And I realized that command and control style was not going to lead me to the place that I wanted to land. And that was fulfilled. I wanted to make sure the work I was doing was purposeful and had an impact greater than the job itself. But I didn't know how to get there. I wasn't sure how to make that pivot, make that transition until one evening when it was the night before I was going to meet with, I would say, the top 40 or 50 leaders of a newly inherited organization that I had just taken a role to lead. This was back in 2017. I just knew I had to do something different. I had the recipe that left me disconnected and apathetic, but I needed to create something different. And that evening, I opened my laptop, kind of scared, didn't know what I was going to say because it was a totally new approach for me. And I ended up crafting these 10 sentences. And they did then, and they still do, begin with the word we. And I'm not incredibly creative, so those 10 sentences became the 10 we's. And they have become my leadership principles, my life principles, and they were what compelled me to write the book. Because not only did I introduce these principles, I watched bosses transform into leaders, and I watched this culture that was historically a bit territorial, siloed. There was a lot of sandbox behavior. For someone to win, someone else must lose. And the 10 We's changed that. And they told me there was a hunger for something more, for more than just this organization. I felt as if I had a bigger calling, and I wrote the book. It became a USA Today and Wall Street Journal bestseller. And now it's my purpose on this planet. I say that with all sincerity. It's to evangelize these principles and help people find a path that doesn't have to end in apathy. It's finding a way to get more out of your existence on this planet than just go to work, go home, lather, rinse, repeat. We have an opportunity to have a much greater impact, but we have to choose it. And that's what started my journey, was choosing a different way.
Kyle, could you share one or two of these principles and explain how they can immediately transform a toxic work culture?
Sure. But I must say, man, before I share any of the principles, I am the first to admit they are incredibly simple. But simple is not easy, especially when we're talking about a team environment where we all bring our own set of baggage, we have our own expectations, we have our own history, we look at things differently. So they're not easy. But of the 10, without question, my two favorite are we number 8 and we number 9. We number 8 is we challenge each other diplomatically. And I never leave that one word second sentence out. Historically, throughout most environments around the world, it's the boss who is the one who is responsible for challenging everybody else. It's a one directional thing. And I just found that if we really want to find excellence, and that's what I'm all about, is achieving excellence, not perfection, but I want to build cultures of excellence. The only way to get there is to get the best ideas on the table. And it's not possible for one person, the boss, to be the only one to issue these challenges because they don't see everything. They're not as close to the work as the front line is. So we challenge each other is about peers challenging peers. Of course, the leader challenging the team, but also the team members challenging the leader without fear of retribution, without fear of blowback, right? And that's where the diplomatically part comes in. I must share there's one little ground rule with this one, though. All challenges must be grounded in either data or experience. They can't just be opinion because we all have one of those, and that's a slippery slope. And then the following we is just as important because we number 8 without we number 9 is really a recipe for chaos, and that's we embrace challenge. Whether the challenge comes from someone on the team, whether it's a peer, maybe it's just someone in passing, it could be the leader, regardless of from where the challenge comes, including outside market influences, by the way. We need our teams to embrace those challenges. Let's not run from them. Let's not shy away from them. Let's lock arms and be galvanized by them. And part two of your question was how can one immediately implement these? Well, first of all, we got to check our ego. If we're in a position of authority, that does not grant us right to all the best ideas. We don't have a license to have the best ideas. But when we have this sense of challenge and we approach each other in a very diplomatic way to say, "Hey, Deepak, man, we challenge each other, right?" You can see the defensiveness drop on the other side because you've already subscribed to these principles. You're part of this team. But when we drop the ego and we focus on what's right, not being right, we're so much better positioned for success. Likewise, when we say we're going to embrace challenge, doesn't matter from where it comes. It just matters that we're going to stare it in the face. We're not going to be shy about it. We're going to acknowledge it. Even if it's a gnarly, ugly problem, we're going to say, listen, this is going to take all of us to get through this. But I'm confident because it's this team, we're going to get through this. And just being really conspicuous and outspoken, really overt to say, that's a challenge in front of us. We're going to tackle it. We may not nail it, but we're going to iterate and we'll get better over time. It's the process that gets us there. So I think those two are they're definitely my favorite. And they're the ones that can make an immediate impact with any leader, any team, in any industry.
You have led tens of thousands of employees in Fortune 10 companies. What were some of the toughest cultural challenges you encountered, and how did the 10 V's help overcome them?
It's been my experience anyway, and I don't want to paint this with too broad of a brush, but it's been my experience that most environments settle for mediocre. It's the way we've always done it. That's my least favorite answer of all. Why do you do something this way? Well, because we've always done it that way. So getting our teams to recognize there is a better way. we can make an impact. We can have fulfillment in our work. The biggest challenge to get from here to there is communication, setting very clear expectations, being crystal clear on who's accountable for what and by when this thing or these group of things should be delivered, and then managing those expectations throughout the whole process. And it's really less about managing the outcomes and more about leading the people to deliver the outcomes. And that's where it's a kind of a nuanced difference. But the first 20 years of my career was like, hey, Deepak, this is on your plate. Go get that done. Let me know when you're done. It's a very different approach to say, hey, Deepak, I think this is where we want to go with this. Let's iterate and kind of go back and forth and collaborate on how we get there. You and I align on what's next, how you're going to get there, the steps you're going to take, and what you need from me to deliver on those things. And then we collaboratively go after it.
Kyle, many leaders struggle with balancing authenticity and authority. How does your book guide leaders to lead with integrity while still maintaining influence and respect?
I really dislike the premise of the question, but I love the way you ended it because I don't think authority is something that we should focus on. I think it's impact and it's inspiring and enabling those around you to be their very best. So I don't really weigh authority versus my ability to have impact. I weigh every individual's needs on the team. One of the principles is we pick each other up. I need to understand what motivates you specifically because we all have different motivators. I need to understand the things that are in your way of delivering excellence. And that only comes through direct communication, being open about it, dropping that ego, as I mentioned, and being open about how we get from here to there. Um, there's this misconception, and I lived it for 20 years, that my title grants me authority. And you know better than anybody that's not the case. No one follows your title. They don't follow your words. They follow your actions. So when we set a group of or establish a series of principles like the 10 We's, and we say these are the principles by which we will hold ourselves or to which we will hold ourselves accountable, we have this level playing field. There's no leadership gap. The boss doesn't have one set of standards and the team has another. We're all on that same set of standards. That requires the leader to be vulnerable. It requires them to acknowledge their own mistakes. It requires them to be relatable. And I think authenticity, at the premise of your question, is absolutely critical. But for whatever reason, I think there's probably a lot of good reasons, but none good enough to make it reality. We conflate the authority that our title theoretically represents with the impact we can have. You don't have to have a fancy title. You don't have to be a C-suite individual to drive big change or be responsible for delivering excellent results. What you have to be is human, and you have to establish trust. And I have this very simple formula for trust. If you want people to trust you, they have to see your authenticity and your relatability. When they know you're authentic and you're sharing your genuine thoughts, good, bad, and otherwise, you're not going to sugarcoat it. You're going to say exactly like it is, of course, diplomatically. You develop a sense of authenticity to which people gravitate. And then the relatability component is equally as important. So, I can show up at the office and say, Deepak, you had X, Y, and Z on your to-do list. Why aren't those done? Or I could say, hey, Deepak, you had X, Y, and Z on your to-do list, but you didn't quite get there. Let's talk about what stood in the way. What did you encounter that stunted that performance, that stopped you from getting where we agreed you would go? I can relate with you missing a target because I've missed targets. If you have a sick child or an ailing parent at home, I can relate with those things as well. It's when I'm authentic and I can relate to what it is that you're dealing with because we have an open dialogue about these things. We're vulnerable and we're open about what's challenging or what challenges we're facing. Those two elements, authenticity and relatability, they always equal trust.
Your book begins with re-emphasis moving from fear and empathy to optimism and fulfillment. What are some practical steps leaders can take to start this transformation in their teams?
Well, I think fear is an overwhelming emotion that a lot of us have experienced from one time or another, or at one time or another, or even now. And maybe perhaps it's something that you always are dealing with inside of the workplace. There's no room for it. There's simply no room for it. Now, that doesn't mean we're soft on problems. It doesn't mean we're not trying to be the best. We're always chasing excellence. But when there's an element of fear, that we need to peel that layer back to understand why. And it's usually because when folks are guided by fear or they operate in this fear-laden environment, it's because they've been burned. They've probably raised their hand in the past only to be met with some type of criticism or some type of deflating response. So why raise my hand? Why try to take on more? Because I'm usually going to be be gifted more work without any more compensation. And then if it doesn't go well, I'm probably going to be reprimanded in some way or the other. There's no incentive for me to take on more, do more. We've got to get that fear out of the organization. One of the principles is we own our mistakes. And the spirit of that principle is essentially to say we're going to make mistakes. We're going to err. We're going to really flub things up from time to time. And that's going to happen almost primarily because we're reaching for new heights. We're trying to do new things. We're trying to be innovative. We're trying to get rid of this mediocrity that has been so persistent inside the organization. And the only way to get there is to communicate and establish very clear guidelines and expectations that when we make a mistake, we raise our hand. Why? Because we pick each other up. I'll run to help you. Your peer will run to help you. We're all in this together. But fear has no place in any type of workplace.
You talk about building a culture of excellence that's sustainable. How can organizations maintain that culture when facing constant change and external pressures?
Man, I love that question because in my experience, again, organizations and maybe more specifically senior leaders of a lot of organizations, they think these types of transformations are a switch. They'll flip a switch. We have culture that is gonna promote excellence. It doesn't work that way. We've got to establish expectations, and that's what the 10 We's do. And then we have to monitor and report out to one another in a very informal way. Are we living these expectations? For example, I work with organizations that have embedded the 10 We's into their performance appraisals, not annual, but quarterly, if not monthly performance appraisals. So we set the standard, we set the level of expectation for how we behave. By the way, I think most organizations do a pretty good job of saying, welcome to the team, here's how you do your job. But I think a lot of organizations, I know a lot of organizations and specifically bosses, they fail to say, welcome to the team. Here is how we behave. Here are the expectations as a team member within this team. When we set those expectations, we're better positioned to deliver greater outcomes, but we can't just set and forget. It's a never-ending process. I like to say every day, every interaction. It's our responsibility to continue to evangelize that message. When we deviate or stray from it, that's okay because we own our mistakes. We're not shy about it. We say, I stumbled. I made a mistake. I blew it. And then we move on. We're tough on problems. We're not tough on the people that surface the problem.
Kyle, my last question. For someone who feels stuck in a toxic environment and ready to be a leader they never had, what's your advice on taking the first step toward becoming a we-centered leader?
Self-reflection. Self-reflection. It's so I have this thing I call the mirror of truth. And it's really a metaphor to say, I'm going to take some time, whether it's early in the morning or late in the evening, at some point, I'm going to take some focused time to ask myself the tough questions, but I got to be ready to answer them and answer them honestly. It's like, am I making good on my commitments? Am I leading in a way that I would be proud to see my leadership example be replicated over and over again? Another way of looking at it, it's kind of corny, but it works for me, is if there were a documentary film crew following me, they were watching me in my one-on-ones, how I facilitated a town hall, how I just interacted with anyone that I passed in the hallway or that I saw on a Zoom call. How is my behavior, or is my behavior, something I would be proud of if someone were to pick that behavior up and take it to their next interaction? And it's through that self-reflection we start to uncover our own leadership gaps. We uncover our blind spots. If the mirror of truth is not something that resonates with you, find a confidant, someone that you know will give it to you straight. They're not going to just tell you what you want to hear. And that's what I experienced, by the way, is the more senior I became, quote unquote, senior I became inside of most organizations, people stop telling you what you need to hear and they tell you what they think you want to hear. How do we get better with that? It's this echo chamber of hearing your same thoughts over and over again. There's no way we can be innovative because we're repackaging the same ideas, the same thoughts. So if you're in this position where you feel as if you have more to give, you want to lead, but the environment may not be right for you, that self-reflection ultimately must end in kind of at a crossroads. Can I be the impactful leader I want to be inside this organization? And I'm not naive, man. There are people inside of organizations, big and small, that sit above us that might not subscribe to a similar way of thinking. If you think you're going to change that, you're going to be disappointed. So you have an option at this crossroads. You either put your head down and do your very best to lead in the circle that you have the most influence, the team that you lead. By the way, you don't even have to have a group of people reporting to you. You can be a leader with no direct reports. How you carry yourself, the example you set. Are you committed to what it is that we're trying to accomplish? If the answer to those questions are no, I still have love for you, but just know that you're not going to have the impact that you ultimately want to have. And at the end of all this self-reflection, you have to make this decision. Is this organization the best fit for me to allow me to be my best, to find that fulfillment, to have an impact, to be passionate about what I do? If the answer is yes, it's probably worth sticking it out. If the answer is no, you may have to leave that company. You may have to take one or two steps backward to take 3, 4, 5 steps forward. But man, it's no different than anything else in life. Anything worth having in this on this planet, during this existence, is usually obtained after overcoming one or more challenges. So we have to recognize the challenge in front of us, see what we can do about it, and if we come to the conclusion that it might be a little too much for us to overcome, then we have to decide, are we going to keep our head down and keep plugging away, or do we want to make that tough decision to bounce somewhere else and hopefully find the fulfillment that we're chasing? But I just can't emphasize enough. Don't wait. Don't wait. Don't wait for someone to come change the culture. Don't wait for someone to come enable you to be the leader that you've never had. You have to make that choice on your own. And you have to make that choice every single day. It's not a one-time event. And that choice might represent some really gnarly things that you have to get through to land on that ultimate outcome, including leaving the organization that you're in.
Thank you so much, Kyle McDowell, for joining us on today's podcast
Of
episode.
course.
Listeners, Kyle's work through his global coaching and consulting firm continues to empower leaders to embrace authenticity, courage, and collaboration, reshaping organizations from the inside out. It's been an inspiring to hear his practical insights and real-world stories that shows us how leadership grounded in we can create lasting and positive change. For anyone ready to lead with purpose and build a culture of excellence, Kyle's message is truly much clear. Thank you once again, Kyle, for sharing your expertise and inspiring all of us lead with heart. Thank you so much.
Deepak, thank you for having me, my friend.
Thank you.